My name is Lia B, and my story is about my early years when my family had to leave Australia, where I was born. It was the beginning of World War II, and we had 24 hours to leave the country. My mother was Australian. She did not have to leave, but she chose to leave with my father, who was Italian, and had to return to Italy. And so my brother and I, with my parents, were left Australia on a Japanese ship. It happened to be the only one in the area, and so it was arranged for us to leave on the Japanese ship. It was a merchant ship. It was an old tug. They went from port to port, buying and selling, and it had been at sea for a couple of years, but they were on their way back to Japan. And so we spent a couple of weeks on that ship, went to Tokyo, and then we were there for a month because we had to find a way back to my father's home country, which was Italy. And it took 1 month to find the way back because the British at that time were in Suez. The Suez Canal was in their hands, and so we could not return by way of Suez. So finally we got permission from the Russians to go through Russia on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. So we left Japan, we went to Korea, to Manchuria, and we got onto the train in Vladivostok. And from there we went across Russia, across the Polish corridor, across Germany, and into Italy, where we ended up at my grandfather's and grandmother's farm in a little tiny village in Italy called Fontaneglato. And that's where we spent another year. My father had no work, and then one day he met a friend who offered him a job in Spain. And so we went to live in Spain, and that's where I started my school. I had to learn Spanish. I spoke Italian. And after a year or two, we moved to another city, and I went to a French school, so I had to learn French. And then after 2 years, we went to Madrid, where I went to an Italian school. And so by the time I was 12, I had to learn all these languages. But then my father got an opportunity to have a job at the United Nations in New York. And so we came to New York, and that's where I had to learn English. We lived in New Jersey, where I went to school, and went to college in New York City, and I ended up teaching Spanish in a New York university called City University of New York, where I taught for 39 years. I taught Spanish and Italian.
How did that event make you feel?
Well, I really had an opportunity to teach in a very fine college, one of the Ivy League schools, but I chose to stay at this particular community college because there were so many students going there who reminded me in many ways of my life, because they also had been uprooted. Many of them in the beginning came from Cuba. Many of my students were Cubans who had left Cuba during the revolution, and they ended up, some of them in Miami, some of them in New York. Those students tended to be very well educated. They had come from very rather affluent middle class families, so they had a good education. And then there were students later who came from the Dominican Republic because they had had a terrible hurricane, and many of them were left without homes, so they came to New York. And we had students from all over the world, and all of them very needy, all of them requiring a lot of training for future jobs. And so I really felt like that's where I could do my best for them.
Um, how did all the experiences from like moving to Italy to Spain like change you?
Well, it, in some ways, it was lonely because every time you went to a new place, you had to adjust, you had to make new friends. On the other hand, I felt like I had gained insights into many different types of ways of life, um, different ways of thinking. I learned to get along with people no matter what languages they spoke. You find out that actually people are pretty much the same all over the world. It's very, sometimes people try to stress cultural differences in order to make themselves, I suppose, feel a little more unique, but actually, people are just about the same everywhere. They may have different foods, different ways of dressing, um, and so that for me was an asset because I knew that I could settle in anywhere and be okay, you know.